A fib extension is often called a trend-based Fibonacci extension. This is a suitable name because the extension beyond the normal parameters of a fib retracement is based on the starting swing point of a new trend. In this diagram, a new trend starts from point 1 from a downswing at 110. Point 1 can be called the originating or initial reversal. This is also sometimes called an impulse. The downtrend then retraces at point 2 on the 100 level. Point 2 can be called the start of the retracement. Point 3 can be called the end of the retracement. Here, it is when a downswing at 107 ends the retracing upswing from point 2. It is common to see the retracement of a fib extension take place within a definable fib retracement on fib retracement levels, but this is not completely necessary. The points that define a fib extension can take place at levels that aren't in a definable fib retracement range, or even at major support and resistance levels. The distance from point 1 to point 2 can be called the base trend. Since this is the trend the fib extension will be based on, the distance from point 2 to point 3 can be called the retracement. The retracement of the base trend, to be more precise. Anything after point 3 is the fib extension. A fib extension uses the same proportions represented by the same levels, but goes beyond the 1 level. Also, the 0 to 1 range is shifted and starts at the end of the fib extension's retracement at point 3. Common default levels beyond 1 include the 1.618, 2.618, 3.618, and 4.236 levels. 1.272, 1.414, and 2 are common additions that are not normally selected by default on most charting programs. Fib extension levels are the distance of the base trend added to the normal retracement levels from 0 to 1. That is why the 1.618 level is $10 or 100% lower than the 0.618 level, and why the 3.618 level is $30 or 300% lower than the 0.618 level. If 0.272 and 0.414 were part of the regular 0 to 1 range in a fib retracement, they would be 100% of the distance of the base trend above the 1.272 and 1.414 extension levels, or, in other words, $10 above. The extended levels can also be thought of from the perspective of the base trend attached to the end of the retracement, where the 2 level is double or 200% of the base trend, and the 1.618 level is 161.8% of the base trend, except instead of starting from point 1, the fib levels start from point 3. The same ideas apply to an uptrend, except in the reverse. An initial reversal starts a base trend with an upswing that is at 100 in this diagram. A retracement of the base trend forms a downswing for point 2 at 110. The retracement ends with an upswing at 0.3 on the 103 level. The base trend is expected to continue higher over 110. The extension levels are still the base trend added to the normal fib retracement levels from 0 to 1. That is why the 4.236 level is $40 or 400% above the 0.236 level. The same idea applies with the additional extension levels, which is why the 1.272 and 1.414 levels are $10 or 100% of the base trend's distance away from the 0.414 and 0.272 levels, if they were levels that were part of a normal fib retracement. Just like a downtrend, the base trend defines the distance from which to reference proportions. The only difference is 0.3 ends the retracement with an upswing. To continue in the direction of the base trend, the proportions are still the same, starting from 0.3. The 2 level is still $20 or 200% away from 0.3. If 0.3 is, for example, lowered, the prices identified are of course lowered. However, the proportions are not. The 1.618 level is still $10 or 100% of the base trend's distance away from the 0.618 level. If the retracement of the base trend is a shorter distance and ends with a higher upswing, the prices identified will of course be moved higher by the increased height of 0.3. In this case, it is a $1.50 move with 0.3 now at 104.50 instead of the original 103 position. However, the proportions still remain unchanged. The 3.618 level is still $30 or 300% of the base trend's distance away from the 0.618 level. A smaller retracement, only $1 or 10% down, moves 0.3 much higher. However, the proportions are still unchanged. The 2 level is still $10 or 100% of the base trend's distance away from the 1 level. The only change is the $6 rise of all fib levels from their original positions when 0.3 was at the 103 level, as opposed to the current position at the 109 level. If we return back to the original position of 0.3 but move 0.1 lower and 0.2 higher to increase the base trend in both directions, there is a much greater effect. All levels have now been moved according to the increased distance of the base trend. The proportions are the same in that the 1.618 level and the 0.618 level are still separated by 100% of the base trend's distance, but the separation in terms of the price range is now the $13 distance of the new base trend, reflected by the $13 difference from 124.03 to 113.03. The higher extension levels have been raised substantially due to the $3 or 30% expansion of the original $10 base trend range. The 3.618 level is now $39 away from the 0.618 level, but it is still a distance that is 300% of the distance of the base trend. Once again, the extended levels can also be thought of from the perspective of the base trend attached to the end of the retracement, where the 2 level is double or 200% of the base trend, or the 1.618 level is 161.8% of the base trend. Except instead of starting from point 1, the fib levels start from point 3. As would be expected, the proportions between the levels still stay the same, but the distance in terms of the price range of the increments between the levels increases even more. Now when only point 2 is moved, the base trend is still expanded. The $16 wide base trend carries over with the 3.618 level now rising even higher to be a $48 distance away from the 0.618 level, but still proportionally 300% the distance of the base trend's distance away. When only point 1 is moved to increase the base trend's distance, the effect is the same as when only point 2 was moved to increase the base trend's range. The only difference is it is an increase of $4 in this case. That means a base trend can be expanded or contracted by moving point 1 and or point 2. Again, when the base trend remains the same, but the retracement of the base trend moves, there is no effect on the distance of the fib level increments in terms of the price range of the increments. However, they are all moved the same distance. In this case, they are all raised $10 higher due to point 3 moving from 103 to 113, while the base trend and fib levels derived from it are still compared to the $20 range marked by point 1 and point 2. Generally, the greatest effect on fib extension levels comes from the distance of the base trend rather than the retracement of the base trend. When both the base trend and retracement of the base trend are moved, there is an extra substantial effect due to both factors at work. This example with the base trend range expanded from $10 to $20 and the retracement raising point 3 by $10 demonstrates the effect quite well with the 3.618 level now towering at 185.36 for a $60 distance from the 0.618 level, though nonetheless this is still a distance that is 300% the distance of the base trend, exactly like the other variations of points 1, 2, and 3 at different positions.